I just want to thank everyone for taking a few minutes out of the day today. I know lunch is ahead of you, and you're probably hungry, but I thought it was important for us to come together like this and address the events of what happened yesterday. Whenever an unsettling and a scary event like that takes place, I think it's important that we find comfort and solace in our Wyvern community, and that these are times we can come together and talk about it for a minute. Um, I imagine that, like me, you still have lots of questions about what exactly you saw yesterday, how it happened, and why it happened. I was in a meeting with Mr. Waldman actually in the afternoon, and my phone kept blowing up, buzzing texts about every 5 seconds until finally I said, "I'm sorry, I've got to look at this." And I saw 30 or 40 texts from friends, et cetera. And when I came home, I watched the news with horror, truly astounded to see that historic seat of our democratic government, the Capitol building, had been invaded by a mob, placing Trump flags on statues of past American statesmen and parading a Confederate flag through the halls of the United States Senate, a flag that represents not only secession from the state, from the government, but is a symbol of racism to millions of Americans. So this is a difficult time in our country, and the events of yesterday are confusing, and yes, they're a little frightening. But I want to remind everyone that we've been through worse as a country, as hard as that can seem, and that our government will not only survive this, but can come out stronger. Our country and our Constitution have lived through a civil war, a Great Depression, 2 world wars, and many other threats throughout our history. And so we'll get through this too. We sometimes have to go through some periods of great challenge to get to a better place and strengthen what we have. Still, I think it's important that we take stock of what has happened and earnestly seek to understand how and why it's happened. And there are a few reflections that I wanted to share with you as I considered the events of yesterday and your role as a student at Kingswood Oxford and as a citizen of this country or of your home country if you're not American. The first reflection is that democracies can be fragile and that they require an informed citizenry who place loyalty to their country above loyalty to a person or party. This has become increasingly challenging as misinformation has been spreading like wildfire. How do we make sense of the fact that so many Americans refuse to accept the legitimacy of a presidential election and are willing to engage in violence to overturn it? How do we understand the sway and influence that the president has had over them? How do we make sense that so many believe in wild conspiracies like QAnon? For centuries, our nation has been a model of democratic strength to others in the world, and we have seen ourselves as a beacon of hope to millions around the world. How could yesterday have happened here? We have seen how leaders can capture the attention and the allegiance of people throughout history, how they can become swayed by promises of salvation or believe that a leader can fix what is wrong in their lives. But I think we all thought that we were more protected from that here, that it couldn't happen in the United States of America. What it does reveal, and is a sober reminder to us all, is that our democracies, again, can be fragile. And they can be fragile because we are fragile. Our brains are more fragile than we like to think they are. Propaganda and conspiracy theories have always held their appeal throughout history, everywhere. They are easy ways to make sense of conflicting ideas in the world. They resolve the cognitive dissonance that happens when facts and evidence contradict our own beliefs and emotions. We experience discomfort. We're uncomfortable when this happens, and our brains seek to reduce that discomfort without us even realizing it in a number of ways. Sometimes it will be to ignore the evidence entirely or avoid answering a question that causes the cognitive dissonance. Other ways our brains rescue us from that discomfort is by denying or refuting evidence. One example of cognitive dissonance that I was thinking of is a willingness perhaps to call out those who kneel during the national anthem as unpatriotic, yet not doing the same when armed rioters storm the Capitol building and threaten democratic proceedings, or downplaying the efficacy of mask wearing and social distancing during a pandemic, despite the science that says that they work, and anti-mask wearing politicians who contract the virus when they don't adhere to the protocols. Now, lest you think that this is simply a phenomenon for those who have supported Trump, it is also true that Democrats show fewer concerns about COVID-19 health when large gatherings or protests are in support of more liberal goals. So we're hardwired to look for evidence that supports our existing beliefs so that we don't have to experience that discomfort of cognitive dissonance. And unfortunately, this has been amplified by social media. It's easy to find the voices in media platforms that confirm our biases. And if you don't know it already, there are algorithms in place that track what you look up and say on the internet and then feed you more of the same, whether it's real or fake, every time that you log on. This may explain or help to explain why so many Americans dispute the recent presidential election results, despite zero evidence of fraud and the court's ruling time and again that it was a free and fair election. Or politicians who accept these claims of fraud and declare that the election was rigged, while failing to acknowledge that in doing so, they also bring their own victory in the election into question, given that they were on the same ballot as the president-elect. So one of the lessons is to understand how easily we can be manipulated and how susceptible we really are. Thankfully, a school like ours at Kingswood Oxford exists to help you overcome that. You're expected to embrace the discomfort of competing ideas while you are here and well after, not to defend your position or your intuitive assumptions at all costs. As Alan Alda once said, begin challenging your own assumptions. Your assumptions are your windows on the world. Scrub them off every once in a while or the light won't come in. Our democracy needs citizens to be deep thinkers, accepting of scientific consensus, respectful of others and their ideas, and showing a willingness to compromise for the greater good. The second reflection that I had in thinking about the events of yesterday is that character matters. Character means being respectful of others and their opinions when they differ from your own. It means holding back when you want to criticize someone for their beliefs or opinions. It means showing a respect for their humanity at all costs, seeing them as a whole person deserving of love and respect. It also means speaking truth to power and being willing to stand up for what is right, even when it is the unpopular thing to do. Character and integrity are not always easy to define. It may be one of those things easier to understand when we see it in action than reading a definition of it. There's a famous saying that character is who you are when no one else is looking. I think that's very true, but I also believe that character is who we are when everyone is looking and when it's really, really hard to stand up for the truth. Edmund Burke famously stated that evil flourishes when good men do nothing. Last night, Mitt Romney didn't do nothing. He had the courage to call out the president about unfounded claims of fraudulent election and for inciting his followers to violence. He said, and I quote, "We gather today due to a selfish man's injured pride and the outrage of his supporters whom he has deliberately misinformed for the past 2 months and stirred to action this very morning. What happened here today was an insurrection incited by the president of the United States." Many other Republican leaders likewise criticized the president, realizing that in doing so, they might lose lots of their votes. My hope for you students is that these events solidify to you the critical importance of being a person of great character and integrity. The third and final reflection that I had was that race matters. Watching the events unfold on television, I, like many others, was struck by the incredible contrast in the responses to the marches for racial justice in the spring and summer, where Black protesters were routinely confronted by riot police armed with assault weapons and tear gas, and those that took place yesterday, an almost entirely angry white mob that was treated with kid gloves for the most part. When people took to the streets in Minneapolis after the murder of George Floyd, President Trump tweeted, "I just spoke to Governor Tim Walz and told him that the military is with him all the way. Any difficulty and we will assume control, but when the looting starts, the shooting starts." When protesters in Portland, Oregon threatened to take down statues, he tweeted, "I've authorized the federal government to arrest anyone who vandalizes or destroys any monument, statue, or other such federal property in the US with up to 10 years in prison." Yesterday, after pressure mounted for him to say something to his followers who had broken into and vandalized the United States Capitol building and had threatened the lives of members of the United States Congress, he said, "We had an election that was stolen from us. It was a landslide election and everyone knows it, especially the other side. But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special." Why are those who wrongly looted during the protests for racial justice called thugs by the president and threatened to be shot, while the rioters yesterday's are special and loved? Why are those who threatened federal statues and buildings in Portland threatened with 10 years of prison, while those who stormed the Capitol building yesterday are not? The events yesterday not only teach us that we have work to do to protect our democracy and strengthen our system of government, but also confirm that there's critical work ahead for all of us to bring about racial justice and healing to our country. Let me make it clear that this is not about being a Republican or a Democrat, conservative or liberal. This is about being an American citizen. Regardless of party or political affiliation, we all must stand together in support of our Constitution and our government and work together to find common ground and to repair and heal our country. When you walk across the stage at commencement and receive your Kingswood Oxford diploma, our hope is that you go out into the world as deep thinkers and thoughtful citizens of the country, always placing your loyalty to the country above that of a party or a person, with a true sense of empathy, care, and love for others. So I thank you for taking a few minutes to bear with me and hear some of my reflections. I know that your teachers and your advisors are available to you if you have questions or want to talk further about what happened yesterday. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing everyone when we're back on campus next week. Okay, take care.